Are you ready to quit your 9 to 5 job and start a business of your own? Well, you're in the right place, my friend. Welcome to the Second Act Success Career Podcast. I am your host, Shannon Russell. I am a former television producer turned business owner, career transition coach, and boy mom. My mission is to help you produce your best life. This podcast will teach you how to get from where you are now to where you want to be, and how to build a business that fits your life and lights you up. Let's get started. Welcome back to the Second Act Success Career Podcast. I am your host, Shannon Russell. If you are multi-passionate, then this podcast episode is for you. I am chatting with Brittany Steptoe Wright. She is the owner and lead designer at BSW Design. She is also the co-owner of Steptoe Carpentry, and she is the host of the CEO podcast. Brittany has a love for design. She also has a love for carpentry and construction and all things sustainable. She wanted to take her passions and merge them together, and she did so with two amazing companies. Today, Brittany is going to share her story of how she became an entrepreneur, and she will discuss her advice for all of you future CEOs out there. Brittany Steptoe Wright, I'm so happy to have you here to share your second act success story. So much to talk about.
Thank you so much for having me, Shannon. I'm so excited. I had you on my podcast as well, and we hit it off. So I'm super excited to be chatting with you again.
Yes, the CEO podcast. I can't wait to talk about that too. And I'll link to that episode in the show notes so everyone can go back and listen. You have a really interesting career, and I want to know where it began. Where did everything start for you?
I went into university. I wanted to be an art curator. So I wanted to go to Egypt and find sarcophagi and bring them to museums all over the world. That was what I wanted to do the day I walked in the front door at university. And I had been accepted on a art history and English dual major. So that's what I was going for. And then about maybe halfway through first semester of first year, I was like, is that really helpful for the world? Am I actually going to be bringing anything to the table that is useful? And for me, that was kind of where I pivoted, is I wanted to do something that was going to help other people and help the state of the world. And I was like, okay, what's the biggest crisis we're facing right now? And one of the things was climate change. I went into university in 2006. So it was that was kind of, I guess, kind of the beginning of when people started talking about it on a large global scale. And so I changed my major to international development and environmental science, which resulted in a degree in sustainability. And I went to work for a company doing solar power in Toronto. So I'm in Canada. I worked with managing kind of all the different solar projects that we had going on. At that point in time, the government in Canada had a program where they would pay suppliers to feed renewable energy into the grid. It was actually super lucrative if you had the upfront investment. So it would cost a couple of million to put solar on the top of your industrial building, for example. But then the government was paying 89, 93 cents a kilowatt, which is these people were banking 300 grand a week in
Wow.
solar power. It was really, really lucrative for a couple of years. I worked in renewable energy across two different companies for about 7 years. Every year they cut down the amount that they would pay producers because it was basically an incentive for people to install green energy and start to power our grid in Canada with green energy. So by the time I was finishing up in that sector, realizing I needed a shift, I think we were down to 60 cents a kilowatt hour. So there was less projects. And I realized that it was going to be another 20 years until that industry had enough money in it for it to actually be something that you could commercialize in a real way.
Right.
So that company made cuts and I shifted over to the parent company, which was a commercial roofing contractor. And I did sales for them for a year, which was really fun. And it taught me a lot about commercial construction and project management in that sense. And then I'd always loved interior design as just a passion. And my father is a residential contractor. So growing up, I would play on his design programs and do floor plans and build 3D models just for fun in the evenings. And I watched a ton of HGTV, and a lady that worked with my mom, her sister worked at HGTV. It was a very weird connection in that sense. And one day she said to my mom, like, would Brittany ever want to do something on HGTV? Like, would she want to do any kind of work in TV? And I was making six figures at the time. Like, I was doing well in my career and I quit and I went and worked as a design assistant on the Property Brothers show for 6 months and got paid peanuts and worked my ass off. But I got so much experience
Yeah.
with working in, really fast-paced design environment. I had no schooling in design at that point in time, so I did a, diploma after that, and then I just started working side by side with my dad in his construction. I worked on the tools, I ripped out flooring, I demoed jobs, I learned how to frame, like, I did all of that for a few months to understand what our employees were doing every day, and then I just slowly started to take on design clients and grow the business over the last 7 years. I've been doing that. And now my dad's retired. I fully run the construction company and the design firm, and that's where I am now.
Wow, I didn't realize he was retired and now it's all yours. That's incredible.
Yeah, he
What a
comes in
journey.
1 day a week because he has ADHD, but
Yeah, I
he
feel like dads never fully retired. They have to be doing something, staying busy.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
well, what an interesting journey to know in university that you want to help the world, that you want to do something that is going to impact others, and then to shift majors and work in environmental studies and help with sustainability. And then to find this other passion too, and kind of put both together, because that's what you're doing now, right? You're doing interior design, you're helping people do construction, and you also add a lot of sustainability and use renewable resources in the work that you do now as well, right?
Yeah, so as renovations and construction, like, I won't sugarcoat it, it does create a lot of waste, and in my opinion, people are gonna do it whether it's creating waste or not, so I try to divert as much of that as possible, so a lot of times we'll reuse existing pieces, we'll refinish kitchens instead of ripping them out and getting new ones, we'll donate as much as possible, so a lot of times people's items aren't broken or bad, they just want something new, and so those items we will donate to, like, Habitat for Humanity. The waste company we use diverts, like, they sort through all the waste and recycle or put it into the necessary channels in disposal afterwards versus it all going to one dump, basically. We use as much sustainable source product as possible, so whether that be, like, the sustainable forestry flooring or whether it be low VOC paints or whether it be just locally made so it's not traveling far distances to get to our project. As much of that as we can is basically just the vendors and kind of process that we've developed over the years, so now it's just, like, natural kinda how we do things. I do try to incorporate that as much as possible, but at the end of the day, it's still construction and it still does generate waste.
Of course, yeah. But I'm sure that what you're doing is a lot more than other construction companies might be doing when they're doing similar renovations.
I hope so. Even in the design world, like, it still bothers me when we order a bunch of furniture and they bring it on the day of install and I see them packing it all away and I'm like, "Make sure you separate the cardboard from the styrofoam."
Right, right.
And and it's just like the little things that we try to do. But I think honestly, with sustainability, if everybody can just do a little bit, like, you don't have to be the best. You don't have to be like, you know, zero waste household, no plastics. Like, you don't have to go that far. But if you can, pack your lunch every day or ensure you're teaching your kids how to recycle properly and reading your town's guidelines on what actually can go in the recycling bin. It makes me so sad when I walk around on recycling day and I'm like, oh, that whole bin is contaminated because they put styrofoam in it. You're not allowed to have styrofoam in it. Like, there's just like these little rules that people just don't know.
Mm-mm.
And nobody says, like, I don't know. It's just those types of things. Like, everyone can do one or two little things that help and we can all make a difference. Like, compounded, that's a lot.
Oh, yeah. And also just from you working in corporate, right? You worked in corporate and for companies that were that were trying to help with sustainability and green and all of that. But now you are running your own company and you're doing design. Like, how is that different to really have your hand in it more like one on one as the business owner compared to when you were working at other companies, maybe seeing other things that they could have done that you didn't have the power to say, hey, you can do that a different way?
This is a big question. I like it.
Mhm.
One thing I felt when I was in corporate was I would have big ideas, and the company I worked for was fantastic. Like everyone had a voice, everyone was allowed to speak. And it was just one of those things where it has to go through so many channels to actually get to a point where you can see it coming to fruition, that it got frustrating when you had a big idea and you got really excited about it and your boss seemed excited about it. And then it just like slowed right down. And like then maybe you saw something or something kind of like it come about in like 6 months' time. And it kind of killed that like passion a lot. And for me, when I really like to, I'm a control freak. I'm type A, which I think a lot of entrepreneurs are. Um, and I just really like the fact that when I have an idea, I have all the power to ensure that that idea comes to fruition. So it all lies on me, whether that idea fails, whether that idea never actually becomes anything. The only person I have to blame is myself.
Yep. That is something that entrepreneurs love, right? Like just knowing that, like you said, you could try something and it's not going to work 100% of the time, but you're in control of whether it succeeds or fails. And I think that's just knowing that you have that control because, yeah, there's something about that trickle down effect, the fact that if you do have that idea, it's got to get approved by 10 different, departments in corporate. And those ideas and those projects take forever to come to
Mhm.
fruition.
And by
So,
the time they come about, you're kind of like, I don't care anymore.
yeah,
I'm on to the next thing. So,
right.
yeah, that would be probably the biggest difference I see is like, yes, those companies have the funding and the backing and the ability to maybe reach more people or something like that. But I don't know. To me, it's like it lives or dies with me as like the
Mhm.
sole pusher of what's happening.
And I think for you too, I love that as the business owner, you have the carpentry side and then you have the BSW design side, which is your interior design, right? So you get to really fill both of your buckets there as well. You've got to feel so fulfilled going into work each day, knowing that you're going to be wearing all these different hats that you really love.
Yeah, there's days where I hate it.
Yeah.
There's days where it's stressful, and there's for sure parts of it I like more than other parts. It's taken a few years, and I think this is probably a good point to touch on for anyone who is maybe entering their second act or thinking about their second act is like you can listen to these podcasts and you're going to hear like the highlights, right? You're going to hear the highlights of my job and what I do, but there's tough times too. Like we have been through 5 years of succession planning. So, trying to understand what it looks like to shift the company from my dad to me. We've spent thousands and thousands of dollars on lawyers doing valuations of the company for purchase. We've restructured and created holding companies to move things around. We've hired construction managers, hoping they would be kind of like the next version of my dad so I could continue doing more of the hands on design and that didn't work out. So that's like salaries for years at the door. Like there's a lot of like not great stuff that comes along with those shifts. But now we're at a point, and this is kind of where I pull on like the woo woo a little bit, is I really, at the end of the day, boiled down, I truly believe the universe gives you the greatest and highest good, is what we call it. And I don't say we, like the people I chat about this stuff with.
Right.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
for for me, it was like things got really quiet last year because of the interest rates in Canada. So we went from 3 crews in the field, so 6 employees working the tools every day, to 2. And I got rid of our construction manager and I got rid of our administrator. I took our overhead down significantly. And I realized it's so much more easy to manage. But I also look at the bottom line and the money is the same because in a company, as you grow, when there's kind of like levels to it. So you can have kind of where you're making money here, and then you can add to that, but you're going to be plateaued to a certain point when you jump. So for us, 3 crews and 1 crew actually equates to the same bottom line when you cut off all the overhead that crews required. Versus maybe if we had 6 crews, but we could manage with that original 3 crew overhead, maybe then you'd see a profit jump. So for me, it's like this is so much less stressful. It's so much less day to day headache. But at the end of the day, the company is making the same money once all the expenses are paid. So I'm like, okay, that makes more sense to me. And if I want to grow it in the future, then I know where that threshold is that I have to get to kind of make that next jump. So now what my day looks like is more managing the overall kind of logistics of the construction side. I have a really wonderful foreman who manages like the actual job on site. I'll pop in once or twice a week. And then I have a really wonderful lead designer who does the majority of our drawings and sourcing and specifications for the design side. And then I kind of just sit and watch and manage and handle all the financial stuff.
Wow, okay, so you're not in there actually designing anymore. You're overseeing and you're putting in your 2 cents and you're just managing it all. That's great.
I will go in, like, I'll sit with her and we'll do like a debrief on the client after. I'll always do the initial meeting with the client. And then we'll sit down and we'll go, okay, this is what we're feeling. And we kind of brainstorm for a while about it. And then she obviously runs all the concepts by me and I'll make small tweaks and things like that. But for the most part, she's fantastic. I kind of just leave it to her and she runs with it. She's better than me at a lot of this stuff. So it's great.
So you have the best of both worlds, really just overseeing it. And I just want to touch on what you were saying because I agree so much. And for listeners who do not have a business yet, they might think of what you were saying about the 6 crews to 3 crews as being confusing. But I've experienced that in my franchise business as well, where you think, I've got to hire more because the more people I hire, the more business I'll get. But then it is that overhead, it's that payroll. So I totally have experienced that where I've brought down the amount of partners that we've worked with, the amount of programs I was doing for my franchise and had less staff and you're making the same amount of money. But it's like a weird thing that I think people don't realize until you're in it. And you have to learn that the hard way, just like you and I both did with scaling, and then realizing that the revenue and profit isn't there as much until you scale it back. So I think that's an
Yeah.
interesting lesson.
So to give everyone listening some like real numbers, with 6 crews, the company was grossing like 2.5 million a year, but we had expenses of 1.5 million a year.
Mhm.
And then, we would have a million left over. And with I'm just using not real numbers, but
Right,
and
right.
then with one crew, you're grossing, say, $1.5 million dollars a year, but you're only spending $500,000 a year. So you're grossing a million. It's like that's where you have to cut it. And that's where companies have a lot of overhead. It's what they call cutting the fat. You think you need all these administrators and somebody doing like payroll and then someone else doing this and someone else doing this. The best thing you can do as an entrepreneur is hire somebody who wears a couple of different hats and is good at those things and is good at the things that you are not good at, because
Mhm.
that's where you can actually succeed in one space while someone else is picking up the slack in something that maybe you don't like to do or something that can be done better than you can do it.
You're right, and you can be the foreman on the construction site and probably do it just as well, but then you know what? You're not managing the business. You're not answering emails, you're not doing the admin, and then you get back at the end of the day and you've got all this extra work to do. So it's yeah, it's being strategic with who you hire for what role so that you can work on the business instead of in the business. Yeah.
Yes.
It's like that more holistic view.
And I would say that is what I'm most passionate about, is working on the business. Like my favorite thing is thinking about what the next kind of big dream is. So for us right now, we're developing a course for designers to learn how to basically start a business. So how to open a bank account, what kind of bank account do you need? How do you register a business number? What website's the best one to use? How do you like all of the things that I had to be like, hey, Google, how do I do this? And it took,
Mhm.
years and years to put together what I now can say is a pretty well functioning system. So we're developing a course to teach designers for that. We're eight modules into a 16-week beta round right now. Um, yeah, so that's super exciting. So I'm really excited about that. And then we have a few other fun kind of online digital products we're developing as well, which are kind of where I'm excited. And then we're still obviously still running everything in the real world with construction and design as well to kind of keep the wheels turning.
When will that be available?
So it's PhD is just kind of a fun play on words for
Mm.
profitable, happy designer. And that is available right now in beta phase. So it's currently 299 Canadian, which it's going to be bumping up October 1st. So that's available right now if anybody wants to get into our OG cohort.
That's exciting. Okay, I'll link to it because I think that's great. It's almost like having that blueprint where you're not going to Google and figuring it out and asking people and just it's kind of like that cut the check to go faster kind of a thing to get yourself
Yes.
there. I love that. That's a
Exactly.
great
Yeah.
idea. And I love that that gets you creative and you know, that's like a different avenue for you to express yourself and really help others in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I realized kind of over the years of having interns and stuff from universities designing with me, kind of what lit me up was teaching them. And I was like, I really enjoy sharing my knowledge and seeing them kind of get it and then seeing them succeed with what I've taught them. And I that's kind of how I decided I wanted to start a course, was because that really made me happy and excited, and it gave me kind of fuel for the fire.
Oh, yeah.
And then my lead designer who works with me, she's got a huge hand in it as well, because when she came in, she'd worked for another designer for a while, and she came in and she's like, I just started my business, but I don't have any clients. And like, this is kind of the questions I have. So a lot of it's actually built on questions of somebody who had tried to start their own business and didn't see a lot of success in that. And kind of answering those questions for her also turned into what this course is built on.
I think that's what we didn't have, and I can vouch for myself too, is like I have a course for career changers because when I was doing it, I was lost. So now it's like, why not take what we learned on our own and help someone else? It's wonderful that you're doing that. And also your podcast. Let's talk about that because you get to share your expertise and all of your knowledge through the CEO podcast as well.
Yeah, so the podcast was just something I love podcasts. Like, I listen to them religiously when I'm working out, when I'm in driving. Like, I don't really listen to music unless it's kind of on in the background of the house. But the podcasts are, I have learned so much over the years from podcasts and gotten so much great advice and just entertainment. And I just love them. So I was always like, I want to see if I can do a podcast, was kind of the original thing. And going back to what I said earlier, like, as an entrepreneur, if you have a dream, it kind of lives and dies with you. So it's like, either get your ass down and record a podcast and, be committed and do it, or don't do it. But like, either way, it's up to you whether this happens or not. So it kind of started as just an experiment of, can I actually be committed enough to record a podcast every week? And can I get these guests? And can I do this? That was kind of the challenge, but we're into season 5 now. So I've been doing it for almost 2 years. I love it. And I've gotten to speak to some people that I never ever thought would say yes. So that is awesome. I've met some fun friends we met on the
Yes.
podcast. So it's been a really great kind of source of exploring and understanding other entrepreneurial journeys. I talk to all different types of creative entrepreneurs. So it's not just about design, but it is about kind of small business and creative entrepreneurship and all those factors in general. And a little bit of spirituality in there too.
Well, I love it. I think it's so fun. It's so valuable. It's a fantastic podcast. All right, it's time for our 5 fast cues of the week. Here we go. Name one thing that these different chapters in your life have taught you.
Resilience. It's kind of manic being a entrepreneur. There's a lot of highs, but there's also a lot of lows, and you just have to be able to put one foot in front of the other during those low points. And someone said this to me in the last, I don't know, maybe 6 months. It hit me really hard, and it was that the earth has to go through seasons. So in winter, everything sleeps, everything is slow, everything is growing underground. It's quiet, it's cold, like, it's very, like, in itself. And then in spring, everything bursts to life. And then in summer, it's vibrant. And then in fall, it starts to like come back into its cocoon again. And for me, that felt really, really relatable when it came to business, because if you are constantly selling, 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 growing, selling, you're going to burn out, and you're never going to be able to develop systems and processes to actually better serve your client. And so we actually need those seasons of rest and those seasons of slow in order to be able to kind of gather ourselves up, get organized, build, dream, go for that next step. And so the resilience is just not letting yourself get down when maybe sales slow down or the phone stops ringing for a little bit of time, and to just pivot and go, okay, this is my season of rest. And to pivot to like that to-do list that has been sitting there with all your dreams on it for the last year and a half that you haven't been able to touch, and like take that time to do that. And the motivation behind that is hard. And that's where the resilience comes in.
Mm, beautifully said. I love that. So, would you recommend taking a leap into a big life change to your best friend?
Yes. as long as your gut says that it's the right thing to do. Also, again, going back to kind of the universe, I do think that if you jump in with your whole soul and all of your intention and faith in it working out, it usually does. I don't think I would suggest it to someone who maybe is like, this is my last $100. Like, should I throw it on the blackjack table type of thing. It's like there's got to be a bit of a support system just because life is hard and life is expensive and those types of things. But I would never deter anyone that I loved from chasing a dream or trying something new. I think we are all so much more capable than we give ourselves credit for. And I think the world right now is built to keep people small, and everybody has something in them that the world needs. And
Mhm.
I think it's only fair to your friends that you love to encourage them to bring that forth and share that.
Mhm. What is one piece of advice that you would give to someone who's about to start a second act?
To be gentle to yourself because it can be it can be obviously stressful, but it can also be very defeating sometimes. And I think a lot of times starting a business is it's just hard. Like I didn't pay myself in BSW for the first 3 years.
Mhm.
I was very lucky to have my dad have a successful built business that I was able to work inside while I built my business. And going back to kind of the jumping all in, I would say the best way to jump in is if you can side hustle it in a sense that you have at least maybe a part-time gig that is paying like at least rent and groceries or mortgage and groceries or whatever it is that has to get paid, and then spending as much time as you possibly can investing in that other portion. So I think being gentle with yourself in terms of like, well, I didn't hit my goal this month, or I didn't get as many calls as I thought I would get, or that product I launched is crickets. It's like those types of things. I will say, do you know Ali Ninfo?
No.
She has a podcast as well. She
Okay.
is like this wildly intuitive, crazy girl down in Texas, and she's like stunning. But one thing she says a lot is it's called the bamboo effect. So bamboo grows, I might get this wrong, but I think something like 12 years, bamboo grows underground and then it shoots up 60 feet literally overnight. And she says, like, you have to remember that it's growing underground for 12 years before you see it. It doesn't just magically appear, although it appears that it magically appears. And I think
Right.
remembering things like that is so helpful when you're starting a business. And I'll even say, like, in terms of um, my design vault, which is that other kind of project I have going on. We started it last summer and I was like running the numbers. I'm like, "Oh, if I sell 10 of these a day, we're going to be banking this much a month. This is great." I've sold three,
Right.
and I sold 3 in the last month. So for almost a year, nothing, crickets, like nada. And then all of a sudden, the sales are starting. And it's like, okay, is this the bamboo? Like, where are we now? Right.
The
So,
bamboo, yeah.
yeah. So it's like, you're going to put your energy in and you're not going to see results right away. So I think being gentle and kind to yourself and not beating yourself up about, I put it out there and nobody wants it. I'm a fake, I'm a phony, I'm an imposter. It's like, no, you're just growing underground right now.
Mm,
And that would be my advice is like, be gentle because we can
gentle.
be very mean to ourselves.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. What is the next act for you?
So I am in my mid 30s. My husband is 2 years older than me. So we're both in our like mid to late 30s. And for me, it's a little bit more about time freedom at this point. So the course and the design vault are all kind of the goal of those is to create a business that's a little bit more able to move around. We just purchased a secondary property in like kind of our ski area in Ontario. So we're looking forward to spending maybe a bit more time up there. So if I have something where I can be out of the office or out of the area for a couple of days a week is ideal for me. And his company that he works with is growing very quickly, and there may be opportunities for movement across the country. So, my next step is to really develop a business that can run itself in terms of me not being physically present, but still being present to manage things. So that's kind of where I'm going with it. Nothing about what we do will change very much, but how it's kind of run maybe will change.
Good. And it's all about getting those systems in place. Like you said, really just preparing for what you want next.
Yes, exactly.
So, where can our audience connect with you?
I'm really present on Instagram at BSW Design. I have a TikTok. My virtual assistant, who also anybody listening who's starting a business, virtual assistants are amazing.
Mhm.
Um, she does a lot of my TikTok stuff based on the podcast. So you can find a lot about the CEO podcast on TikTok. So you can follow that there. But I would say for me personally, BSW Design on Instagram, and then bswdesign.ca for our website. Thedesignvault.ca is that side of things as well. And the CEO podcast.
Okay, I'll link to everything in the show notes. And Brittany, this was just so much fun. And I really want to thank you because I really am inspired by your career and all the advice that you shared.
Thank you, Shannon. It's been such an honor to be here, and thanks for inviting me on.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. I hope you found some gems of inspiration and some takeaways to help you on your path to second act success. To view show notes from this episode, visit secondactsuccess.co. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss a single episode. Reviews only take a few moments and they really do mean so much. Thank you again for listening. I'm Shannon Russell, and this is Second Act Success.